High school history lessons will teach you that America was founded on freedom and liberty. But that's a load of shite. 'Twas land theft, racial capitalism, slavery, and genocide. The founding fathers were not fighting an empire. They just wanted to build their own. These men were enslavers, speculators, and wealthy elites from Britain. The original 13 colonies were enterprises. Just like the East India Trading Company, the Virginia Company, and the Massachusetts Bay Company also had royal charters. Early settlers were not pioneers. These men were debtors, land thieves, and slave owners. It was the British elites who invested in the colonies. They wanted to go where the people couldn't see them, to exploit the land, use enslaved labor, and grow cash crops. America did not start as a nation. Let's be clear. It started as a business venture for the British elites. The same people who were shameless about starving Indians to grow opium to make Chinese people addicted so they could steal their tea, went to the America to grow tobacco. George Washington had 300 slaves. Thomas Jefferson had 600 slaves. Both of them openly admitted that slavery was evil, but refused to give up their slaves until after they died so that it wouldn't impact their profits. James Madison architected the Constitution of the United States to protect the wealthy elites. Alexander Hamilton created the US economic system modeled on the East India Trading Company, on the British exploitative corporate model. And John Hancock was a literal pirate. He was a smuggler who was rebelling against the British Crown. His only reason to start America at all was because he didn't want to pay taxes anymore. These were the dregs of humanity. They were the people that the British didn't want. They were slavers, they were land thefts, and they used addiction economies to keep themselves rich. They still do. The American economy was fueled by addiction: tobacco, sugar, opium. They knew that their economic control worked best when they could get other nations addicted to their products. It wasn't just a slave empire, it was a drug cartel. American schools teach a sanitized version of their history, and a lot of it is fake or hyperbole. All that shit about cowboys and Indians and pioneers, it was a murder spree. Why is the US always the good guy? The British Proclamation of 1763 blocked these fuckers from expanding west, and that pissed them off. They had huge financial interests in going west. George Washington was part of the Ohio Company. This was a land investment group that illegally stole native land. Jefferson said that he saw Native Americans as an obstacle to civilization. And after the Revolution, they immediately dismantled all the British treaties and headed straight for the protected indigenous lands, launching a genocidal land grab. It was never about freedom. It was about profit. The US economy was dominated by slavery, but also smuggling and piracy. And it was when the British cracked down on smuggling that the colonial elites panicked and started the propaganda towards the revolution. They had created the most efficient slave system in the world, turning human bodies into pure capital. The southern cotton industry powered the northern banks. And American finance firms like JP Morgan Chase and Lehman Brothers, they literally started through funding slavery. Even after abolition, Black people have been perpetually re-enslaved through more manipulative and insidious practices, right up to the current day. There's been convict leasing, Jim Crow laws, debt peonage, sharecropping, private prisons, and then just the flat-out lynching of children. We'll get into how they psychologically manipulated the poor white people to do that on their behalf, but we want to stay on topic. Today is about the rich motherfuckers, who you should have no respect for. These are nothing founding about these fathers. These were merciless assholes that Europe rejected because they were so severe. The whole fucking thing was a Ponzi scheme based on addiction economics. They kept their own people and international people addicted to substances that they could grow cheaply with enslaved labour, and they relied on cash crops. Tobacco was the first billion-dollar industry in the world. They invested in the Opium Wars, they encouraged the British, and in the 1800s, opium became one of America's biggest exports. And guess what? Big Pharma today still follows the same model. Create addictive substances, make them widely available, and then get rich off human suffering. It's not capitalism. It's an addiction empire. And the US Constitution was never about democracy. It was about protecting wealth and property, which slaves were considered. The Supreme Court was created to serve these ruling elite. Judges are unelected and serve for life. How is that democratic? The Constitution has been continually weaponized to protect the white wealth and block any real democracy from forming in the country. Beyond their colonies, they continue on their imperialist expedition. They've taken over Puerto Rico, the Philippines, Hawaii, Guam. They created banana republics in Latin America using corporations like United Fruit Company to control the local economy. And today, the IMF and the World Bank serve to politically and economically enslave, exactly like Britain did with India. The founding fathers were not running from the terrible empire. They were saying, fuck you, king, I want to be the king. I'm going to take my own piece of it. The idea that anyone can be successful if they work hard is social engineering designed to stop you from rebelling. The reality of it is, wealth is inherited. This system is rigged and social mobility is almost impossible. 90% of the US wealth is controlled by less than 10% of the population. And yes, the same families that owned plantations still control the land, the banks, the money, the corporations of America today. The self-made man is a myth. Every single billionaire got rich through inheritance and exploitation and corporate welfare. The American dream is such a lie. Sugar from the Caribbean funded Wall Street banks. By 1850, enslaved black people were worth more than all the railroads, banks, factories, everything combined. They fought wars in Mexico to steal Texas and California just so that they could plant more cotton and expand slaves. And they knew exactly what they were doing. They wrote about this, they debated it, and they made sure to legally protect their wealth while selling to the public the myth of freedom. James Madison even proposed sending the black people back to Africa rather than granting them freedom. The Constitution protects slavery, and they weaponized patriotism. They convinced poor people that fighting for rich landowners was fighting for liberty. And they hilariously built this myth of America as the land of the free, while they literally were enslaving millions of people. They encouraged the poor white people to see the enslaved black people and the Native American people as their enemy, so that they wouldn't all team up together and rebel against the rich. And they created this myth of the American dream, so even the poorest white man could really believe that he too could become a billionaire. The entire American legal system was created to ensure that wealth equals power, and so that nobody outside of the elite class could ever challenge them. The Americans took British concepts of propaganda and psychological warfare, of class control, and brainwashed the American population into thinking that their own exploitation was good for them, was freedom. The US was always an imperial project. It just had better PR than the British.